So what happens when a government decides to completely tear down the walls between itself and its people? Well, today we've got an incredible story from Indonesia, all about building trust one piece of data at a time. You know, it's a question that leaders everywhere grapple with. When public funds just seem to disappear into a black box, how do you fix that gap? The gap between what the government knows and what the people know. It's a massive challenge, for sure, but one community found a pretty brilliant answer. Our story takes us to Bulukumba Regency in Indonesia. It's a really vibrant region, but it was struggling with this fundamental problem: a deep, deep information gap between the local village governments and the citizens they were supposed to be serving. And this wasn't some minor hiccup. It was affecting pretty much everything. So, first, let's just take a second to understand the scale of the problem. We're talking about a situation where secrecy wasn't, an accident. It was basically the default setting for how things got done. And that gap had real-world consequences. It wasn't just some abstract idea. Think about it. Public trust was in the gutter. Without any oversight, the risk of money being mismanaged was super high. People couldn't get simple answers about projects in their own backyard, and all of that just created this constant friction that held the entire community back. But here's where the story takes a turn, because out of this challenge came this really innovative solution, a program they called INFO PAKDE. It was a strategic plan designed specifically to tear down those walls of secrecy and instead build bridges of transparency. And right at the heart of this whole thing was a brand new, absolutely crucial role, the PPIDs. Now, the key here is that this wasn't just a friendly suggestion. It was a legally mandated position. For the very first time, every single village was going to have one person who was officially on the hook for managing and sharing public information. That's a game changer. The strategy was just so powerful because it rested on three really simple, solid pillars. First, a strong legal mandate from the top. This made it crystal clear that transparency was no longer optional. Second, they used smart digital tools, like giving every village a free standardized website. That immediately removed the technical and cost barriers. And third, they empowered the people who would actually run the system by giving them intensive training. Okay, so having a great plan is one thing, but actually making it happen, that's a whole other ballgame. Let's take a look at how Bulukumba managed to turn this ambitious idea into a reality on the ground. And get this, they moved at lightning speed. The entire foundation, we're talking team creation, legal backing, training, the digital launch, all of it was put in place in just a few weeks in late 2023. This was not some slow, bureaucratic crawl. It was decisive, rapid-fire action. So you might be wondering, how did they pay for it all? With a really clever synergy model. The main Regency government covered 80% of the cost for the big ticket items, like servers and training. Then each village chipped in just 20% from their own funds for local stuff. This shared investment created a sense of shared ownership, and it made the whole project sustainable for the long haul. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The team definitely ran into some major hurdles. A lot of the village officials just didn't have strong digital skills. There was this deep-rooted culture of secrecy they had to overcome, where just sharing budget info felt weird to people. And of course, in some of the more remote areas, the internet was just plain unreliable. So how'd they solve these very human problems? Not with some top-down, easily overwhelmed help desk. Nope. Instead, they created something way more resilient: the Village PDM Forum. It's basically a peer-to-peer support network that let officials who are more tech-savvy help those who are struggling. It was an absolutely ingenious community-based solution that built up both skills and a sense of solidarity. All right, so we've seen the problem, we've seen the plan, and we've seen how they rolled it out. Now for the most important part. Did it actually work? Let's dive into the impact. The transformation was honestly like night and day. They went from a messy system of random manual requests to a standardized digital platform. Paperwork that was once buried in filing cabinets became searchable public data that anyone could see online. This fundamentally flipped the script on the relationship between the government and its citizens, kicking off a whole new era of transparency. And the scale of this success is really captured in this one simple number: 109. That's every single village in the Regency. This wasn't a pilot program in a few hand-picked spots. This was a comprehensive, wall-to-wall transformation of how they do government. And this is way more than just a great local success story. What Bulukumba pulled off aligns perfectly with the UN Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is all about building effective and accountable institutions. They took a huge global principle and actually put it into practice, village by village. So, as we wrap things up, what can other places learn from this incredible initiative? Well, the story of Info PAKDE basically gives us a clear blueprint to follow. It really boils down to three crucial takeaways. First, you have to get a legal mandate. High-level political backing is completely non-negotiable. Second, build peer support networks. A community that helps itself is always going to be more effective than a central help desk. And third, you've got to incentivize the change. By linking transparency directly to performance reviews, it stops being a nice-to-have and becomes a core part of the job. And that brings us to a final thought. The story of Bulukumba proves that transparency isn't just some lofty, far-off goal. It's actually achievable. So the question for all of us is, what are the information gaps in our own communities? And more importantly, what's the very first step we can take to start closing them? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.